The information provided is not a substitute for legal and other professional advice where the facts and circumstances warrant. People should always consult their own legal or other professional advisors and discuss the facts and circumstances that apply to their specific circumstances. The information shared on Ask the Landlord is for educational purposes only.
Here's my question today, Albert. What is the difference between a co-op and a condo?
Very good, Melissa. I mean, that's a great question. And a lot of people don't know what that is. So let's just make sure we know. So co-op is a cooperative form of ownership, and condo is condominium form of ownership. So in New York City, we have a lot of co-ops because really it was a New York City phenomenon. We'll talk more about what that was. And then around the country and the world, you see a lot of condominiums. So really, we'll speak about condominiums first and then co-ops, cooperatives later. Condominiums are basically where, let's say you have a building and it's a number of apartments, and then everyone has individual ownership of their apartments from the walls in. And then there are elements of the building that they share that are common elements, right? Like the hallways, the outside of the building, in some cases the balconies. So, but if you wanted to buy a condominium, you could just buy a condominium like a house, but it's a house that's stacked on other houses, right? So the rules about, there are some rules obviously about condominiums where the building was built in a certain way, and you need to know that, and they have some rules about what you can do with your condo unit as part of the neighborhood or building. But generally, whoever wants to buy a condo can buy a condo. Where I've seen in the past where condos say, okay, well, you can't rent out your unit for a certain amount of time or things like that. Those are some rules that people have, or you can't put this signage outside your apartment, or, we gotta have the hallways a certain way. Though, these condominiums have certain rules to keep the building looking a certain way or the neighborhood looking a certain way. But that's the simple condominiums. Is that right? So then with condominiums, generally less restrictions on who can buy them and how they can be financed. And, a condominium is like a house, okay. So when you want to buy a house, you own the house, you buy it. Condominiums usually, so when you have a house, right, you have the grass, you have the snow, so let's say in the Northeast or whatever, or wherever, you have to clean up after yourself and you have to pay for your maintenance of your property, right? As a condominium, obviously there's like hallways, or sometimes maybe you have a doorman, or there's some common area things, right, that you have to contribute to as a group, right? So those are called common charges, sometimes called assessments. So the building is usually governed by a condominium association, which is a nonprofit that is run by a board, usually elected from the owners, that make sure that everything goes along well. Like everyone's common charges need to be paid into a certain account, and then the condo association, the board, manages that. Like, is there a management company that's managing? Is there a doorman that we have to pay? Who cleans the hallways? What about upkeep of the building that's not inside your unit? So let's say, the building outside the facade needs work. They make sure they reserve for that in a budget. So when you're buying into a condominium, you need to check into those things, like, what are my common charges covering? Condo association fees, that's what that's, and like, what are they covered? And then sometimes it's like, make sure it's well funded, and Sometimes there's things that happen that they make special assessments to the condo owners. So those are things to be aware of when you're getting into buying a condominium association.
Are those monthly fees or is that a yearly fee? How does
Typical
that?
monthly fees that people pay, like common charges would be for trash removal or cleaning or landscaping or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
those are, and part of that's reserves to make sure the building's fixed up and things like that. So sometimes though there are extenuating circumstances that require a condo association to make special assessments. So those are things that you need to be aware of when you're buying into a condo association. Co-ops, from what I understood in my research, is that they're really like a New York City phenomenon. What happened was people were concerned about living in these buildings, and they wanted to sort of make sure see who their neighbors were going to be, control that, and in a way, instead of, as opposed to a condominium where you own your own condo unit and you could buy that, and there's like no one could stop you from buying that condo unit, right?
Mhm.
In a cooperative, what happens is there's a corporation that owns the entire building, including your apartment. And when you buy your apartment, you're not buying your apartment, you're buying shares in the corporation that are equal to your apartment. That sounds like a little weird, right? So you're not really buying your unit, you're buying shares in the corporation that owns the. So what that does is that has you be subject to the approval of the co-op board. So there's a board of directors and rules that runs the cooperative company that owns the building, and they decide the rules of who can live there and who can't live there.
Hmm.
So that's not so easy. So I'm going to give you some examples of some rules of a co-op. So what happens is then you have to apply. So let's say someone's selling their apartment, a co-op, and you want to buy it. You buy it. You sign up to buy it. And you're like, oh, it's hard enough to buy it and get a mortgage and all that stuff. And you're like, now you have to file a whole like board package where you're like, you have to submit your letters of recommendation and financials and all this to another group of people to get approved by the board. So it's a bit nerve wracking. And they have rules about how much you have to put down, how much you could borrow.
Wow.
To like some places say, some co-ops here in New York City say, you know what, no financing is allowed.
Wow.
Like that's, I mean, you could see how that limits the buyer pool.
Definitely.
Or they'll say, oh, you could only do up to 50% financing. Oh, and oh, by the way, those common charges that we discussed in the condo, we have them too, but you have to demonstrate that you have to have a year's worth of them in the bank. Okay. Then there are some that says, you know what? We want only people that live all year round in the apartments. Like, so I know you, Melissa, and Alan travel a lot. And let's say you go into the co-op board and you go, oh no, we like to travel and we're only going to be home 3 months out of the year. And they go, no, we don't want that. We want people that this is where they live, and it has to be your primary residence. I'm like,
Wow.
no, but you say I can afford to pay. I don't care the mortgage. No, they go, it has to be your primary residence.
Wow.
So you could tell me that I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's not fair, but it is what it is,
and
I
then
guess.
right. And then these boards also, I say, you know what? We don't want this person because it's going to bring too much publicity to the building. There were some celebrities that notoriously some boards didn't allow into their co-op because they
Ooh,
didn't want to have that.
juicy.
Yeah, they didn't want to have those. They didn't want to have that sort of thing in the building. It's wild. So what happens then is that, well, now let's say you did all that and you got approved. So now you could see that a condominium and a co-op, while they both like look the same from the outside, they're not the same, right? So co-ops, for that matter, usually in New York trade for about 20 to 25% less
Hmm.
than condos. So that's sort of a place you could look for a deal
That's interesting.
if you could deal with their rules, right? If they work for you. For example, we were in a co-op, and the co-op had rules. The person who owned the apartment couldn't rent it out for more than a year or more than 2 years to somebody if they didn't want to live there. Right. So that means that there was a rules. So you couldn't. So those are important things to know when you're getting involved. If those rules make sense to you, that's fine. But if not, obviously you have to deal with it. So that could be it could present an excellent opportunity for the people that can deal with that, because that you'll be getting a significant discount to what you could buy in a new condo. Because a condo now, so now I think you would say, oh, well, a condo, somebody, let's say from international, could buy a condo. And someone can buy a co-op too, but there's much bigger buyer pools for condos because people don't ask. There's maybe a approval to move in, but for a condo, but for a co-op, there's a real board package that you have to fill out, and it's like you have to meet with the people and present and get letters, and it's almost like joining a club, which is crazy. So those are. And then also co-ops have their common charges the same way, very much similarly to condos. So very interesting. Now, there are co-ops that function like condos, meaning have less stringent rules. They're called condops, so you could look for those too. Like they function more like condos. So those are, available, but you don't know that until you search for them on the market. But it's a very cool, like interesting way of differentiating these constructs of how these buildings are set up. And again, in the co-ops, as similar to condos, there's common areas of the building that are shared, but there's generally much more of a rules governance with co-ops than there are with condos.
Are co-ops nationwide, or are they predominantly in New York City?
They're predominantly New York, but they did, once something worked in New York, it got more prevalent in I think it happens in other places, but you see more condos in others, but it definitely happens in other cities as well, but mostly condos in other cities and condos and co-ops in New York as well. So super creative thing there. Yeah.
So as a renter, I probably wouldn't see any units that are in co-ops. I would most likely
You
see.
No, you would see
I could,
both
if it's allowed.
You would see both. I've rented in co-ops. What to know is there might, as a renter who's renting in a condo, there's for an owner of a condo to rent, there's rules about what the term is that they can rent and things like that. Fine. There's probably more rules for a co-op. And then as a renter, you want to know what the setup is of the building that you're renting from, right? So is it owned? So, and it's good to know, like as a renter. So you're saying, well, is the building a rental building? Like, is that what they do, rentals? Or is the building condo owners and they rent it out? Mostly, like you want to know, most of the people who live in this building, are they owners? And then some of them rent out. Oh, that's could be condos. And then you have a building where, most of the people live here all year round, and it's co-op and some people rent. Okay. So you sort of want to know, because if you might, some places have rules where you could only stay there for a year or two as a co-op, as a renter. So, sometimes if you're renting in a co-op, you should know that there are rules for that. And you also have to go through a board approval package. So, you may first have to get through the application process with your landlord as the owner of the unit. Then you have to sort of go through a board package, which is it's not bad or anything, but it's something to know that, you also have to go through another approval step, which may make it cheaper to rent again. So
Are all buildings either co-ops or condos or that other one?
or
The
rentals.
the combination of the two, condo.
So all buildings are whatever they are, so you can have buildings that are rental buildings, like multifamily buildings, right?
Okay.
That could be owned by one landlord, owner, or whatever, and they're just rentals. Most buildings are rentals.
Okay.
And then you have buildings that are condominiums, and then you have buildings that are co-ops. Well, the condop is a co-op that has like looser rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's more like, it functions like a condo, but it's really a cooperative.
Okay.
And then there's when you own in a co-op or condo, there's an opportunity to participate in the ownership group, in the board of directors for the association, so you can participate in the what happens with your apartment, with your neighborhood, with your building. Like, people sometimes do that.
All right. Very good, Albert. Thank you so much for explaining the difference of a co-op, a condo, a condop. I really learned a lot here, so thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.